Hello, America lovers. Anthony Zuzlo here, broadcasting to you from a state-of-the-art studio and totally not a warehouse in Brooklyn. So this is going to be one of the least funny videos I put on this channel. Of course, considering the subject matter, you'll understand why. It's the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And I, for one, cannot believe it's been 22 years since that day. Our whole world changed then. It's just mind-blowing. And I wanted to make this video because I think that people born around the time that I was born have kind of a unique relationship with that day. And maybe people that want to get insight to that might want to hear me talk about it a little bit. So, yeah, I don't know. Last year was the 21st anniversary, obviously, and I just remember thinking that it was crazy that everybody born before 9/11 is now legally able to drink in this country. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's just a weird tidbit. I don't know. So I think that there's kind of two different perspectives as a whole from people that were alive on 9/11. There was an adult perspective and a child perspective, and those are two very different ways that I think people were affected. I mean, there's multiple ways, but I would say those are the two main sort of branches that everybody goes off that was alive back then. I would say that as children, we didn't have the fully formed view of the world yet, so we didn't really know what was going on in context the way that an adult would have. And I think it's important to add that the world in general was already in the midst of a big change, particularly in the area of technology. I think that it was becoming intertwined with our daily lives, because around that time, a little bit before, you had your family and you would all kind of share the one computer. Not everybody had their own personal. Now we have like multiple devices where we access the internet from, but back then it was pretty much, there was one computer and everybody in the family would have to share it. I mean, if you think sharing a computer isn't that big of a deal, instead of having three all to yourself, just imagine what it was like. I mean, I didn't do this because I was a good boy, but a lot of my friends probably did. They probably very likely had to sneak out in the middle of the night to the living room or hallway or wherever they kept the computer if they wanted to look at something naughty. So that probably is a thing that's going away now. Not that that's the biggest change in the world, but you get what I'm saying. It wasn't, all the information in the world wasn't so readily available at your fingertips when you just wanted to know anything. It was much more of an effort. So there really was a uniqueness in growing up at that time. Now, when it comes to that day in particular, I would say that adults witnessed those events and they were inundated with a sense of uncertainty, maybe about their family or just what the world was going to look like from that point forward in general. I would say the difference between that perspective and being a kid on that day was that we were more naive. There wasn't a sense of fear that adults had. We knew that things were different, but I wouldn't say we had the knowledge that equipped us to be the proper level of afraid, if that makes sense. I would say most of all we were just confused and we were mad. Like, we knew somebody was messing with us, and we knew like anger was the knee-jerk response to that, but we were also kind of confused. Like, it was like, well, why would someone do this? So we were confused as to why, and then mad that it happened, rather than feeling despair or just dread, I guess. Now, I didn't grow up in New York City. I am from the New York area, but I didn't have any family or even really friends that were living in the city at the time that I knew. So it wasn't a tragedy for me personally in any way. It was just kind of on the same level as most other people living in America during that time. I would say for me, the uniqueness came because the event happened right around a transitional period in my life. On the day those attacks happened, I was just starting high school, like my first or second week of high school. So it was a very transitional period. On the one level, you had this transitional period, this milestone that everybody goes through, and you're adjusting to that and all the ways that your life's going to change because of it. And then you had a global phenomenon that was changing the world at large. So that's why I say people who were born the year I was born are kind of in a unique spot when it comes to 9/11 and what their relationships to the day is. As for where I was specifically, when I heard the news, I was in my school's cafeteria, and it was my lunch period, so it was about 10 a.m. And then this guy who works at the school, this official, he was a black guy, and I'm only really mentioning it because, like, if you've ever seen an action movie from, like, the 80s or 90s with a black police chief that was just like, "Damn it, Johnson, hand in your badge and gun," like, that was kind of his energy. In general, I wouldn't say on that day. But anyway, he comes in to the cafeteria, and he tells everybody to listen up, and it gets real quiet, and he says that there's been a fire at the Pentagon, and then I think he mentions that it was a terrorist act, and in the back of my mind, I was just kind of just like, oh, there was a fire at the Pentagon, so what, some idiot threw a cigar into the trash can and it caught fire, like, and of course, as the day went on, that became clear that that was not the case. Maybe that was just a defense mechanism for me, who knows, but that is kind of a thought that I had, and I wasn't the only one, though, that was kind of like that, because I had a friend, he's like a little bit younger than me, and on like the 10th anniversary of 9/11, he posted something like, 10 years ago I had this sandwich, and I bit into it, and it was the best sandwich I ever ate, when everybody else was like, 10 years ago, our world changed, or 10 years ago, I remember where I was. So people were understandably upset with him, but I think they were misinterpreting what he was saying. Like, I think he was pointing out his own immaturity, and he was trying to kind of come clean about it and say, hey, I grew since that day, is what I think maybe happened. Memory is a little weird, because for whatever reason, I didn't remember being sent home at first, and like, until a past anniversary of 9/11, when one of my friends like was talking about it, and she said we were sent home, and I was like, oh yeah, we did get sent home, because I remember going home and my mother was there, and like, I don't know how to describe her, but it was just like, maybe she was shocked, I guess, I don't know, because she for whatever reason, she just didn't seem like herself, really. Like, but she wasn't like sobbing or like devastated. It just seemed like it wasn't her. and she was watching the coverage on TV of the Twin Towers, and you saw the smoke coming out of the side of the building, and she mentioned it, but we didn't really get into a deep conversation because I was still her kid. I don't think she really wanted to get into it. She was probably processing all that stuff herself. And there's other little things that I remember, like I called one of my good friends from school at that time. He did live in the city, but now he was living out in the suburbs with us. So I was just like, hey, you okay? Is everybody okay? And he was just like, yeah. It was just like, just checking in, that sort of thing. Also at the time, I didn't really know anything about global politics, and like a couple teachers talked about it. I remember my math teacher kind of discussing who Osama bin Laden was, and like I didn't even hear the word terrorist before 9/11. And then for a while after that, there was just sort of this despair floating in the air. People were just kind of going through the motions of their daily lives, is probably how I would describe it. Just people going through the motions of their daily lives. I kind of call it the opposite of Christmas. That's how I would describe it, because maybe not anymore, but when I was a kid, like around December, people would just automatically be nicer to other people. Like they would just be in a cheerful mood, and you'd be like, if you cut somebody off in traffic, you'd probably like flip them a finger on a normal day, but like around Christmas time, you'd just be like, oh, it's Christmas, and like you wouldn't do that anymore. Whereas like around 9/11, it was just, instead of automatically being cheerful, everyone was like automatically just like dour and sullen. Like my family, we went to the mall one evening afterwards, and we went to one of the stores in the mall, and I guess the business card for the store had the Twin Towers on it from before the attacks, and I remember the guy who worked there just was talking to somebody else, and he's just like, yeah, nobody's taking our business card. It could be that the Twin Towers are on there, and it's just reminding people. And that was the thing that was believable. Like, people just didn't want to see the Twin Towers because it reminded them of that time, which I kind of never clicked with. To me, it was more just like, I want to see the Twin Towers. Like, let's build them back up, man. Just come on. Like, we're not going to let this get us down, are we? But, everybody processes their emotions in different ways, I guess. And I also remember the message "never forget" was everywhere on, the back of trucks and in windows, that sort of thing. Because we, as much as they wanted to forget by not having the Twin Towers on the business cards and that sort of thing, they also just felt that if you forgot completely, then you're kind of opening yourself up to more pain. And there were also news reports about Muslims and Indian people being the victims of violence. There were also rumors on a more local level about that sort of thing. I luckily did not witness anything like that, but it is a shameful chapter of our history that we reacted that way. I mean, on some level it's a bit understandable that, well, I wouldn't say understandable, but people do naturally, I've noticed, just don't always know how to process their emotions and will lash out at whoever. In this case, it was a little more focused, although that focus was certainly misplaced and a load of crap, and we should be ashamed of it. It is a shameful part of our history. Luckily, I would say things are getting better in that regard. I mean, we still have a lot of work to go, but I mean, I can't imagine people behaving that way on a wide scale in the modern era, and that's a good thing. Eventually, the national conversation turned to, what are we going to do about this? Particularly, are we going to send the troops over to the Middle East? At the time, I would say that I was like, yeah, of course we should. Because it felt like you couldn't just do nothing. Like, you couldn't let people do something that evil and then just be like, well, whatever. That, I would say, was the opinion of a kid. I mean, it was the opinion of many adults too, but I would say, in my case in particular, that was just, let's be honest, that was more of an emotional reaction than a logical one. And now that I have more knowledge about what goes on in the world, I would say we should have done something, but maybe not that particular action. I don't know if I would still say yes or no, because I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm willing to say that maybe I, in particular, should not have had an opinion about what to do, because I was a 14-year-old kid. Not that 14-year-olds shouldn't have opinions about things, but they don't always have the life experience to know what is what. Now, if you're familiar with the Constitution, only Congress is legally allowed to declare war. So it seemed like what happened was that President Bush and Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld used a loophole in the legal system because the president is the commander-in-chief. So he used that loophole to just station troops in the Middle East without declaring war, and then Congress later maybe felt obligated to officially declare war. I don't know if that's what actually happened. Again, I was 14, so maybe I'm wrong about that. About how we got involved in the Middle East. But I do remember when we finally did, I was watching TV and it was Dan Rather on TV, and he's just talking. There was a map and he's pointing out all the areas, and he's just like, oh, and this area is populated by the Sunnis and this is by the Shiites, and over here there's the Kurds. And I just remembered because I had never heard of Kurds before, and I had also never heard of Dan Rather before. So yeah, do I still think we should have gone to war? Again, I don't know. I don't think I have the knowledge on whether or not that would have been a good idea, so I don't want to give you my answer. Because I don't want to upset anybody that may have had family go over there, or just really don't want to upset anybody who has feelings about that day in general, just by saying one way or the other. Because it was a time where we all came together, and the theme of this channel is kind of for us to come together too, so I don't want to be one of those people that divides us with my answer. Not that having opinions means, not that you can't have opinions, because they're divisive. I mean, they are, but I just don't think it's worth really mulling over, because it's something that we'll never know the answer to because it's in the past. So like I said, it's been 22 years. And that reminds me of a particular episode of South Park where the cast of characters said that it takes 22 years for a tragedy to be funny. So with that in mind, I am going to tell a 9/11 joke, because I personally think that humor is a way for some people to heal. I understand that some people don't like humor about specific things because it hurts them and they want to get better, but I think you should consider the fact that other people, those types of jokes actually make them feel better. So it's like, why not make them feel better? So I'm also planning on playing a video clip after the joke, so if you don't want to hear a 9/11 joke, just skip ahead to the end clip if you just want to watch that. But if not, here it goes. So a terrorist is on trial for 9/11, and the prosecutor leers at him just because he's an evil man, the terrorist. Maybe the prosecutor too. But anyway, the prosecutor says, how could you ever crash a plane into the Twin Towers? and the terrorist goes, because if I crashed into Detroit, nobody would care. If you're laughing, maybe that's a sign that you've healed. So I hope I helped you heal. This is the part where I ask you to do something. So I think that society has a lot of days that we set aside for remembrance. The thing is, we kind of don't really take the time for that, a lot of us. I'm not trying to shame you, but it's the truth. We don't really pause, most of us, on Memorial Day, Veterans Day, to think about the people that it's supposed to honor. Maybe even Mother's Day, Father's Day. Some of us don't even dedicate the proper time for that. So what I really just want you to do today maybe is just take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long you're comfortable, and just sit down in a quiet place and just think about that day. And think about, if you were alive, maybe think about what was going through your head, what was going through your friend's head. If you weren't alive, maybe just imagine what it would be like getting news like that. Maybe, whether you were alive or not, think about what it was like for the people that just booked a flight and thought they were going wherever they were going, and instead they were hijacked. Or think about the people that were in the two towers and just wondering how they were going to get out, whether they thought that they needed to run down the stairs very quickly, or if they could save themselves from jumping, or whatever was going through their heads. And in that way, I hope that you empathize with them and remember them and honor them. Or if you think that's lame, just maybe pick some other way. Try to figure out some other way that you think that could be helpful and just to the point of the day. Alright, so with that, I leave you with this footage about that day. If you don't want to do that other stuff that I talked about, maybe you can just use this video as that.
Stuff is still falling. Let's get out of here. Mike, we're gonna get killed. Mike, we're gonna get killed. Mike! Mike! Mike, stay out of the path.
Fell, dude.
Mike, you have to stay away from the towers. You're gonna get killed. See the pieces falling, Mike?
When was the first time?
93.
What happened?
I walked out of the basement, the walls came in.
Please like this video if you did. Leave a thoughtful and interesting comment down below. Please don't write anything political. I know the nature of this video is going to lead some people to want to write something political, but let's keep that post 9/11 spirit of togetherness intact down below. And subscribe to the channel. I feel like that's a weird thing to say on a 9/11 video, but you know, you gotta say those outro things. Yeah, so have a nice or